Welcome to Crosspoint.
Welcome to Crosspoint.
Welcome to Crosspoint.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition.
It's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Give yourself away, and to hear the call is to give your love away, and to hear the call is to give your love away, and to hear the call is to give your love away, is to give your love away. We're not safe, but we will beautiful love, with arms of a mother, holding her daughter, guiding her son. Beautiful love, the strength of a woman, birthing her children and bearing their pain. Every breath that you breathe, every song that you sing, strong and gentle, wild and controlled. Every move makes a sound, every tear feeds the ground. Strong and gentle, beautiful love, beautiful love, with eyes full of comfort and hands that have nurtured. House is our home, beautiful love, dressed in all wisdom, all God and all human, all light and all love. Every breath that you breathe, every song that you sing, strong and gentle, wild and controlled. Every move makes a sound, every tear feeds the ground. Strong and gentle, beautiful love. Strong and gentle, beautiful love. Strong and gentle, beautiful love.
Good morning, Crosspoint. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm excited to share with you some of the many ways that you can engage in what this community is up to. One of those ways is by volunteering together on Saturday, September 25th from 10 to noon in the Crosspoint Auditorium to package food for Rise Against Hunger. Rise Against Hunger creates packages of nutrient-fortified, shelf-stable food that can be easily distributed to those experiencing food insecurity as a result of poverty, natural disasters, or ongoing famine. One of the great things about this particular opportunity to serve is that it's open to anyone ages 5 and up, so families or life groups can serve together. However, we do ask that you sign up, and you can find the link in our e-news or on our website. Also, one of the beautiful things about being a community are the ways that we get to support each other during difficult seasons. If you find yourself in the midst of one of life's rough patches, we encourage you to connect with one of our peer mentors. Mentors have been trained by Crosspoint, and they're willing to serve as a listening ear and provide wisdom and encouragement in a safe environment during a stressful season in your life. You can meet with a mentor virtually or in person. If you're interested in connecting with a peer mentor, you can find more information at crosspoint.org/mentoring. As you know, the Crosspoint community has been able to gather in a wide variety of ways over the past few months. Those ways include summer Sundays, small groups, student ministry gatherings, Kids Point live services, service days, and a whole lot of other ways. We're excited for our local Crosspoint community to be able to gather together again on Sunday morning, September 26th at 10 a.m. So for the first time in 568 days, you can put the whole family in the car on a Sunday morning and drive to Crosspoint for a church service. What a moment to celebrate. We will gather outside and masked, and we'll be asking that you bring your own chair. Children's ministry and middle school ministry will hold outdoor masked gatherings as well that are concurrent to the adult service. As usual, high school students will gather for rhythm on Sunday evening. So if you are local, we would love to see you there. We'll share a few more details next Sunday. Also, you want to make sure that you are getting our weekly e-news just in case we need to provide up-to-date details in case we're impacted by rain. If you are not currently subscribed to our weekly e-news, you can sign up by going to crosspoint.org/e-news. However, if you are part of the Crosspoint community and you're not local, or if you're not able to attend in person, or if you just want to stay on your couch, we will still be online on Sunday, September 26th as well. It is an honor to get to be in community with each of you. There are lots of ways that you can participate in what this community is up to, and one of those ways is through financial contributions. You can give through stocks, PayPal, mail-in checks, or debit cards. To do that, you can go to crosspoint.org/contribute, or you can text Crosspoint NC to 77977. That will send a link to your phone, and you can choose there how you would like to contribute.
For the next handful of weeks, we're going to come at several of Jesus' parables from several angles. What's a parable, you ask? A parable can be a simile, an allegory, a metaphor. They're little stories that Jesus told that sort of artfully avoid being direct, so people will keep talking about what he's talking about, considering them, trying to find themselves in them. Because a rule is a rule to follow or to break, but a parable it can be like a highlighter. It's a flashlight. It's like this invitation to engage with the imagery so that you can reconsider your assumptions, maybe some blind spots. And many wisdom figures tell stories like this to engage a larger idea in a clever way, but Jesus is probably best known for them. So we're going to consider a few of Jesus' parables in the weeks to come. But before we get to one of Jesus' parables today, I want to consider another story that I bet you're at least vaguely familiar with. It's a fairly famous story in the 3rd chapter of the book of Exodus in the Hebrew Scriptures, where Moses, who tends a herd of sheep for his father-in-law, he's out in the wilderness with the herd, and he's been doing this by this point for decades. Life for Moses was pretty slow, seemingly uneventful. He probably would have said his life was unremarkable. But he wasn't aware that he'd been learning something. Something was slowly developing inside of him over those decades. And so then one day he notices that there's this bush, a shrub, and it's on fire, which, as I understand it, happened from time to time. The brush fires occur. And so you steer yourself and your flock of sheep around them. This one was different. The bush was on fire, but the fire wasn't consuming the bush, which, I don't know, it might have meant that it looked like it was on fire, but the branches weren't charring. The leaves didn't fold in and become ash. There was ostensibly no smoke if it wasn't being consumed. The bush burned, but it didn't, which others have pointed out that would take a little bit of staring to notice. And I mean, anybody can say that, hey, the bush is on fire, but only people who observed, held still for a few moments could say, wait a minute, this is strange. It's on fire, but it's apparently not firewood. So Exodus reads, Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight, this astonishing sight, see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Then God said, come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Moses gets divine credit for noticing and paying close attention to something others would have dismissed if they would have even noticed at all. And when he notices, he hears his name, he hears this invitation. He's told that the ground that he's standing on is holy ground. Which, of all the things we could say about that, isn't it interesting that the ground hasn't changed in this moment? Moses is simply coming into an awareness of what is already true, something he had taken for granted. Maybe he'd taken for granted for decades. And Moses, and those Moses would soon lead, are rewarded simply for noticing and appreciating subtlety, something that he'd maybe not appreciated all those years before. And so hold this picture in your mind. And then we'll scrub through, the chronology of the Bible, several generations, many centuries, to the Roman Empire of Jesus' day. The history of the Roman Empire is fascinating, and I don't know everything about it that I'd like to know, but it's fascinating. Rome began as this underdog republic, but it started picking fights in Italy to gain more control over itself, to have more power for its own people. And they ended up toppling the Etruscans. And after several years, they defeated the Samnites and Greeks and were able to take control of the whole Italian peninsula. And then after some time, they defeated mighty Carthage, which added much of present-day Spain, much of northern Africa to their territory. So it's growing. They gained so much power, so much ability to inflict damage on their enemies. Then they took Greece and Syria and Macedonia and then Egypt. And then under the leadership of Julius Caesar, very power-hungry human being, the Roman Republic took Gaul and expanded north all the way to what is now Britain. Then his adopted son, Augustus, pushed into the north and suffered some defeats trying to expand the borders. That put the northern borders on the ropes, but then eventually comes Emperor Trajan. By the end of the 2nd century, pushed the empire, and it's an empire now. It's no longer a republic of the people, but it's an empire ruled by its showy and deified emperor. It pushes its borders all the way into modern-day Hungary, nearly as far as modern-day Russia, and then it takes Arabia and Armenia and then more. Eventually, you could walk from northern England to the Persian Gulf and never leave the empire. It just kept getting bigger and bigger. Now, there's a debate about how this expansion was able to happen so successfully. And not least of these reasons that are understood is that Rome had gotten really good at force, militaristic, overwhelming. If they wanted something, they took it. I mean, who was going to stop them? The empire forced its way into your world, announced itself as bringing its modernity, its order, its peace, and it made bloody examples of anyone who attempted to match their force with force. You couldn't do it. They crucified rebels, they terrorized resistors, they threatened. They did entertain those that they oppressed with what's called bread and circuses, literally giving people food and entertainment to pacify them, remind them that, hey, it's good to be ruled by this tsunami of dominance. And by the way, whose fields do you think the grain was taken from to make all that bread for the bread and circus, right? But, I mean, the show they put on was really good, at least, right? This was the kingdom that everybody knew, everybody feared. And you could belong to as much out of the benefits that came with it as the fear of the pain and suffering that came with opposing it. This was the kingdom. If you said kingdom in Jesus' day, this is what you were talking about, this empire. So then there's this teacher, this healer, this storyteller, who walks here and there and everywhere in this one small corner of the Roman Empire. It's Jesus of Hicksville, Nazareth to be exact. Nothing ever interesting came from Nazareth. Jesus of Nazareth. And he tells stories about a kingdom, this other kingdom. And the stories weren't long, and they certainly weren't immediately appealing to those wondering when God was going to finally show up and raise up a new and bigger and better empire to crush the Roman Empire so that things could get back to being the way they're supposed to be. Jesus tells these stories. And he says, "What is the kingdom of God like? To what shall I compare it? It's like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed into the garden, just threw into the garden, and it grew and became a tree, and the birds of the air made nests in its branches." And again, Jesus said, "To what should I compare the kingdom of God? It's like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until there was yeast in all of it, until it was all leavened." He also said, "The kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep, would go to bed and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow. He doesn't know how. And the earth produces of itself first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes with his sickle because harvest has come." The kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, as he also says. When Jesus uses this terminology, he's making a contrast. When he says this, it's a contrasting statement. He was countering the assumptions of what a kingdom and what power and peace and good actually look like. So not only does he give these parables about the kingdom of God and what it's like, the term itself, kingdom of God, it's a parable in itself. The empire of heaven is an artistic counter-argument. And it assumes a different sort of togetherness, a different sort of society. The kingdom of God isn't like the kingdom you all know and whose boot treads you've been stuck in your whole life. The kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, is like a little seed that you might not even notice somebody tossed into your garden. A seed so small you might dismiss it and say, no, for me, I'm a sunflower seed guy because they're bigger, they're heavier. But that small, dismissible seed slowly, quietly, gradually takes root and becomes an enormous tree. It's like yeast, microscopic fungi made of a single oval cell. You can't even see it unless somebody scrapes a bunch of it together and puts it in one of those square little packs that could just as easily be an alcohol wipe. The kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, it's like a little bit of that stuff that some lady massages into some dough, and pretty soon there's no getting it back out. You can almost hear Jesus saying, we've all seen the empire of Caesar, of corrupt, power-hungry, nepotistic, condescending men who will kill every man in your family and then cry out, Pax Romana, peace of Rome. But the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, it's like somebody scattered seed in a field and then confidently, peacefully went to bed, not feeling tasked with much more than a daily acceptance of how things genuinely, slowly, subtly work. With a little patience, a little trust, it'll soon be time to harvest. Little seeds becoming trees that birds can nest in. Little cells that increase the flavor and the smell and the nutritional value of bread. Little seeds that with no force of your own, but with time and with persistence, become a field's worth of harvest. In each of these cases, each of these stories, notice the seemingly insignificant thing becomes the significant thing. Notice how, but when they become a significant thing, it's not for domination. In each case, it's for shelter or for food. The kingdom of God is like seemingly insignificant things that grow not for its own sake, but to be slow and steady until the effect is the blessing of others. These parables don't make any mention of winning competitions, or expanding its borders for the sake of becoming mightier, or trying to end up even in history. It just does what it does, gently, subtly, patiently, powerfully, until others are blessed by its undeniable success. Which sort of redefines success, doesn't it? It redefines power. And it does so within the framework of a story, an allegory, which is really such a gentle and patient, unforceful way of Jesus engaging the kind of mentality that he was challenging. However, the allegory is about something real. In the same way that the empire, the Roman Empire, it's not a metaphor. It was a very real expression of the problem human beings, us, and our desire to overpower and propagate without any regard for the negatives. The kingdom of God is an illustrative term, but it represents something very real, a very real alternative way of being a human being. And it's actually truer to reality, truer to how things really are. Imagine, you know this, imagine trying to bust up asphalt with a wooden baseball bat. I mean, hit it as hard as you can, harder than anybody else can hit it. Really make it known that you are going to be victorious over this asphalt. Well, what's going to happen? You're going to hurt your hands. You're going to cause more pain. You're going to break your bat. You're not going to do much to the asphalt. So what is happening here? These roots are also made of wood. They're not even as hard as the bat. They're soft, they're pliable, but they're patient, they're persistent. It's a gentle strength. Its patience is its power. Some of us forget that this is what reality is actually like. Some of us forget this right when our children seem to go off the rails. We go into like bust up the asphalt mode and we freak out. We forget that raising a child is a process. It takes 100 years. And they still, after 100 years, don't turn out the way we thought they were supposed to, thank God. Or some of us will have circumstances unfold at work or wherever, and we try to force it back to how we want it, trying to break things and causing more headaches as we go, forgetting that the kingdom way starts with power that comes from gentleness and wisdom. It doesn't start with my will be done. It starts a totally different way. How many of the things that we've most deeply learned within ourselves, it took us our whole lives to learn it? How many projects or relationships or bits of wisdom were enhanced by what the root has done, not what the ball bat has tried to do? See, here's the thing. We're not often very much like the roots. These descriptions, Jesus' descriptions of the kingdom of God. We're not like that because we're so often on autopilot. And on autopilot, we tend to be loud and impulsive. We're more likely to be intense and demanding, this now or never disposition. We tend to feel like we don't see things, if we don't see things happening in our way and in our time, then we're going to give up and just do something else that pays off faster. And the society we've made for ourselves, it functions this same way, just on a large scale. It's the same mentality. Immediacy, snap judgments, instant payoff, or I'm not interested, conquer it, close it, or move on. And our society has little use for slow and steady for the sake of the whole. Our society tends to reward speed and efficiency only, measurable results in as few days as possible. And sure, speed and efficiency have their place. There are plenty of things where wisdom and compassion would dictate immediate action where necessary. Absolutely. I mean, obviously, if you fall and get stuck in a hornet's nest, slow and steady aren't probably what you want from me if I could help. And there are some real people in some real metaphoric hornet's nests who need more than thoughts and prayers. But if we believe all of life is a hornet's nest, then we're not going to have any idea when and how to act. We're going to be stuck in a perpetual upset. And so perpetual forcefulness, it's like constant heat, but no light. So hear me on this. Most of reality doesn't require haste and shows of power or victorious finality. Sit with that for a second. Most of reality doesn't require haste or power. On autopilot, we forget this, which gets us settling for cheap definitions of power and meaning. It's just winning and domination. No real good gets done that way. Things just stay anxious and superficial. An abundance of new problems arise from the empire solutions we keep offering. But the kingdom of God, it's like a tree growing from a seed you barely noticed. It's like yeast. Makes dough rise. It works. It's not intuitive. You probably won't win a debate about it working. But it's how things really are. See, the mindset behind the Roman Empire is all too similar to the mindset behind the empire we live in now, as well as the mindset that we have in place as we engage with one another in our relationships and our work and even ourselves. It's a mindset whose reflexes are more akin to fight or flight, which is the liturgy of the animal kingdom, not the kingdom of God. And so if we're in that headspace and we hear Jesus talk about the kingdom of God and the mustard seed and all that, and we say, yes, that's true. It's in the New Testament. There it is. And we incorporate it, and we incorporate those words into our minds, almost like trivia. But then we go about our lives by the same stories of winning and domination and might is right, and of forceful way getting and instant results, or what's the point? But Jesus isn't telling religious stories for us to memorize. Jesus isn't telling religious stories and these parables about the kingdom of God. Jesus isn't telling Christian stories. Jesus, he's not telling stories for us to remember as it pertains to our doctrine, or this little segment of us that we might call our spiritual life, like we've got multiple lives. Jesus is offering a different way of being a human being, a way of being human beings together. It's not some private religion with its private trivia. It's a different way, always available in this moment and the next, to interact with each other and with the earth. Think of it. Jesus' parables are him saying, in the real world, you know how empire keeps expanding its borders by subduing anything and everyone it makes contact with? And you know how when those who oppose you and won't see your point, how it makes you really frustrated, maybe even furious, and you want to just label them and then wash your hands of them? You know how people get together for what they say is a good cause, a moral cause, a biblical cause, and yet they inflict suffering on those who disagree, who see things differently? You know how in the middle of an argument you can tell that you're not as right as you keep yelling that you are, but there's something in you that won't let you stop arguing because losing the argument feels like a threat to your identity and you're being worthy of respect? You know how nations and economies and companies often attach their continued existence on endless growth, global or market dominance? how they can never be content or equitable or at rest. You know how it feels like if you sit with an emotion or a thought before speaking or reacting? It's really uncomfortable. It's like holding in a sneeze that you'd rather just let fly. What if I told you that deeper, underneath all of this, is a truer and more profound way of being a human being? One that can go slow, yet enduringly, in a way that will very much be successful. But successful in it being good for others and for you. From it coming from non-anxious, non-violent, non-selfish, entirely inclusive and kind and just and mindful living. See, these are snapshots of the kingdom of God. This is a snapshot of the kingdom of heaven. They're not religious stories. It's a human invitation, a way of being human beings together. But we have to remember that we're responsible for switching off autopilot so we can choose it. So we can live in this way that's marked by wisdom and justice and real health, a way of being humans that's undeniably recognizable as persistently healthy, never trying to dominate, it's not that kind of a kingdom. It's always offering its branches for food and shelter. So in the weeks to come, we're going to deal with other parables, but let's recognize for now that as we go into the very next moments today, these next hours and then next days, we're going to be constantly invited to notice burning bushes in our midst. To know, if we'll notice, a different story is being made available to us. A story that's not born out of impulse to dominate or to conquer or to get a payoff or to win for winning's sake. In the next little bit, an argument is going to come with a loved one or an opponent. It's coming. An opportunity to be the only one willing to do the right thing while everybody else is doing the fastest, most comfortable thing. That's coming. A moment where you could crush someone because they seem to be begging to be crushed. That's coming. A moment or a season where supporting ideas and policies and philosophies that could provide you and yours with convenience and security and comfort, but it will happen at the expense of others. It's coming. There's a moment coming where you can make up your mind about someone instantly and treat them accordingly. Or you could suspend your judgment, go slow, and keep seeking to see, to understand. That's coming. There's going to be a moment coming where nuance and mystery and introspection won't make nearly as much emotional sense as demanding answers, refusing to change your mind. It's coming. A whole bunch of moments like that are coming, and it'll be right then that the kingdom will be whispering. But how would yeast do it? How would little seeds do it? What about doing it in a way that slows the tape and finds a way to be a blessing, one that can last beyond this moment, beyond yourself if possible? It's right then that the burning bush will be noticed rather than disregarded. And so instead of the story going toward more lostness and more tension and more misery, like the kingdoms of humanity always produce, it will move a little more toward awakening and more freedom, as is the fruit of the kingdom of heaven. I'm sincerely hoping to, with you, be found saying more yeses to these invitations, more and more every day for the rest of our lives, to say yes to that whisper. And so, as we close, let's slow down and listen for that wisdom that can only be found when we slow down and listen. For just a few moments, let us practice saying yes to be a living part of the ongoing, gentle, patient, powerful kingdom of heaven.
Thank you for joining us today, and welcome home. If you are in need of assistance during this crisis, please reach out at crosspoint.org/help.